are people in Sri Lanka that are standing up for freedom and democracy and human rights. And there are people in Sri Lanka from all communities that are standing up against the Rajapaksas. So there is some hope. There is not just about the international community changing and not within human rights. And there are people in Sri Lanka and also citizens that we use all of our here in Parliament and the platform that we have as parliamentarians. It's also really important that you use the networks that you have within the communities globally to lobby members of Parliament, but also to make sure that what we're saying here is heard in Sri Lanka, and that where you've got family ties, community ties back home in Sri Lanka, that they're hearing what we have to say to them, they know that they're not on their own, and that the world hasn't gone the failures during the Sri Lankan Civil War. We're determined to put things right. So a challenging moment, I think.
I would like to invite the Right Honourable Freedom Billiard. Without you, without your help, we won't be able to go to this special event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I start, I might just apologise in advance. I have a little bit of an asthma problem at the moment, so I do a bit of coughing and spluttering. I can assure you it's nothing infectious, just a bit of asthma. And as your parliamentary host this evening, it's a great honour to welcome you to this screening of a new film about violence and human rights abuses in Sri Lanka. I'm grateful to BTF for putting on this event. It's great to have groups like this back in Parliament after the ban of a couple of years. And of course, all of us here know the tragic history of the conflict in which so many people lost their lives and which left so many more people bereaved. And it is important in this Parliament that we always speak up for the Tamil. And I want to pay tribute to the efforts of the Tamil diaspora here in the UK and around the world for all they've done for this crucially important cause. It's, I have to say, deeply worrying that the human rights situation in Sri Lanka continues to deteriorate rapidly. It is a matter of great sadness to me that those who predicted that this would be the consequence of the return of Rajapaksas to government have been proved right. And now, of course, the Sri Lankan economy is in crisis as well. And of course, we have to recognise that Tamils living in the northeast are subject to a double disadvantage, not only this latest economic crisis, but living in areas already devastated economically by civil war, where they continue to have their economic opportunities blighted by excessive militarization. As we all know, Sri Lanka's military spending is huge, leaving less for infrastructure, economic development, and less for support to the vulnerable. In recent years, it is frankly astonishing that spending on the armed forces has actually exceeded levels in Sri Lanka which were witnessed during the civil war itself. So we must see the Sri Lankan government start to militarise the north and east. A concerted effort is needed to normalise the security and human rights situation there in accordance with HRC resolution. And investment must be pushed into delivering prosperity for the Tamil people in this part of the island who have suffered so much. And of course, we've all here called for an end to impunity. Accountability for war crimes is at the heart of the UNHRC process. Making progress on collection of information to build those cases is vital if justice is ever to be delivered. And many of us have, of course, also asked the UK government to impose Magnitsky sanctions on that list of men credibly identified by the UN as involved in war crimes during the Civil War. And finally, of course, we need a negotiated solution to reform politics and constitution. We need new power sharing and devolution arrangements to ensure that Tamils have their say in the democratic process and in how they are governed, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past are never ever repeated. So I'm sure that the film we're about to see will provide great insight into the suffering of the Tamil people. And I'm certain that it will give all us parliamentarians here reasons to redouble our efforts in this House to secure justice for the Tamil people. And I thank all of you for coming along, both my colleagues and members of the community. And it is now my great pleasure to pass on to Shivani, who will take us through the next stage of this.
As you'll see, the documentary consists of video, photographic, and documented evidence collected over more than a decade by the British Tamil Forum team. It reinforces the concept of continued cycles of violence and genocide, which in turn has been vital in the recognition of the repeated conflict and humanitarian crisis in Sri Lanka. Something that has been largely accepted by the United Nations Human Rights Council and their staff. Before we proceed with today's programme, if you don't mind some formalities and house rules. We'll be recording and telecasting this event live on Zoom and YouTube simultaneously. We must warn, this documentary does contain some graphic images that some viewers find disturbing. And if you haven't already, please put your phone and devices on silent. In the event of a fire alarm, please calmly use the fire exit at the front and back. Before we proceed with today's programme, if you don't mind some formalities and help, we'll be recording and telecasting this event live on Zoom and YouTube simultaneously. In keeping with the practice, let's observe a few moments of silent prayer in the memory of those who sacrificed their life for our freedom and to remember many murdered innocent civilians. If I can ask for all of you to stand, thank you. Before we play the documentary film, I would like to invite panelist Sadmila Balasaran, the British Tamil Forum Deputy Human Rights Coordinator, to speak further about this document. Thank you, Sadmila.
Thank you all for joining us today for the screening of the documentary on continuing cycles of violence and genocide in Sri Lanka. The documentary will take us right back to the start, to 1862, which substantiates there has always been an intent to commit genocide against the Tamil nation in Sri Lanka by initiation.
One of the root causes is the singular Buddhist ideology. This ideology has led to Tamils being murdered, losing their livelihoods and homes, and losing their identity, so that the Sri Lankan state can create a mono-ethnic, mono-linguistic, mono-religious country. They are achieving this through violence, military, and implementing discriminatory laws and suppressing the Tamil nation's rights. Sri Lanka is relabeling the Tamil nation as a minority as part of its genocidal agenda to eradicate Tamil. What is genocide? The United Nations definition of genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or part of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. As such, killing members of the group, causing deliberate bodily or mental harm to members of the group. There are two elements to genocide, the first being the mental, which is the intent part, and the second being the physical. This documentary will provide evidence of both elements being used in the destruction of the Tamil nation. Tamils have been deliberately targeted for decades and decades, and this violence and ongoing genocide needs to end. This can only happen if the international community intervenes and ends impunity by credibly accused perpetrators by the UN Human Rights Council are sanctioned and brought to justice for breaking international laws. While watching this documentary, I request you all keep in mind what is the way forward. The three Tamil political parties on the ground have requested for a political solution, federalism. The international community has attempted this location before, where a specific government has organized a venue for the Sri Lankan state and for representatives of the Tamil nation to meet in person, but facilitation has failed. In 2006, the UK, US, and Japan attempted mediation to negotiate a settlement. This was led by Eric Solheim, and again, mediation failed. The other option we have moving forward is arbitration through the UN Charter Article 33. The arbitration also needs to include judicial procedures, either led by the UK, US, or India. I'll speak a little bit more about I'll speak a little bit more in detail about the way forward after the screening of the document. Thank you. If we can ask if the light turns off.
continuing cycles of violence and genocide in Sri Lanka. The myriad of violence encountered by Tamil people cannot be covered within the time parameter provided, and we will try to present them as much as possible. Historical background in the preceding cycles of violence in Sri Lanka show that the Sinhala Buddhist ideology has been a major factor of the root cause for the deterioration of the peace and harmony in the country. This predicament has left every Tamil's life in Sri Lanka in a perilous situation. Unless the international community intervene and take tangible action to find a solution for peaceful coexistence, Ireland and the sensitive region around Sri Lanka will continue to be a theatre of conflict. With this brief introduction, let us see what the Tamils' plight has been during the past 7 decades. In an effort to verify the root causes of the current situation, it is prudent to analyse the historical development of Sinhala Buddhist chauvinism prior to gaining independence from the British Empire. Inspired by preachers such as Anagarika Dharmapala, one of the most influential Sinhala Buddhist revivalists at the turn of the 19th century, the first phase of the Sinhala Buddhist revivalist movement with the anti-Christian sentiments originated the Pannadura debate in 1862. Sporadic attacks on Christian churches, dignitaries and Christian civilians were reported when another Pannadura debate took place in 1873, and it repeated in Kotahena, Colombo, in 1883, followed by a burning down a Catholic church in Anuradhapura in 1903. The riot in 1915 by the Sinhala Buddhist chauvinists was directed on Muslim traders and shops against the control of over much of the business world by the Muslim community. Since Britain gave independence in 1948, the Tamils have been predominantly targeted with an agenda of eradicating Tamils and making Sri Lanka as a mono-ethnic, mono-religious and monolinguistic country. More than 150 recorded massacres have been committed periodically by the Sri Lankan state, Sri Lankan armed forces, paramilitary and Sinhalese mobs, causing more than 150,000 Tamil people losing their lives to date. Local Sinhalese colonists and employees of the Gal Oya Development Board seized government vehicles and weapons and killed over 150 Tamil people. Based on recovered body count, the estimate up to 1,500 Tamil people were killed by the Sinhala mob, starting on the 22nd of May and continued till the 29th of May, despite an emergency was passed on the 27th of May in 1958. 9 Tamil people were killed and further 50 Tamil civilians sustained severe injuries when the Sri Lankan police force went berserk and opened fire on the Tamil civilians and academics who were attending the 4th World Tamil Conference organised by International Association for Tamil Research in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. The violence broke out and spread across the island, where Sinhala mobs murdered hundreds of Tamil civilians by burning them alive, raping, killing and looting their homes and businesses when the Tamil United Liberation Front had a landslide victory and won 18 seats at the 1977 general elections, with a manifesto of working towards reinstating an independent, secular state of Tamil Eelam, citing the sufferance of 3 decades of oppression perpetrated by the Sri Lankan state. The Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, PTA, was introduced in 1979 with the primary motive of suppressing the voice of the Tamils in the country and to have power to arrest arbitrarily, torture, assault sexually, imprison and execute, including disposing bodies without inquiry. Since introduction, thousands of Tamil men and women have been arrested, tortured and sexually abused and made to disappear, and these are continuing even today. The Tamil people's irreplaceable assets were deliberately destroyed when the Jaffna Public Library, the biggest library in South Asia, was burnt down by the arson attack by the Sinhala mob, brought by a ruling UMP party, headed by Cabinet Minister Dharmini Dissanayaka from the south of the island. Over 97,000 important ancient manuscripts, including memoirs and works of Tamil writers who made a significant contribution toward the sustenance of Tamil culture, medicine and politics, were burnt to ash. For the Tamils, the devastated library became a symbol of cultural genocide. Over 3,000 Tamils were killed, burnt alive, scores of Tamil women were raped, over 150,000 Tamils became displaced, and over 8,000 Tamils' own businesses and homes were looted and burnt down by the Sinhalese mob during the state-aided Black July pogrom occurred between the 24th and 30th of July, 1983. The Tamils were pulled out of the passing vehicles onto the street, were hacked to death, were doused with petrol and burnt alive. A Western tourist witnessed, quoted, "The thing was entirely sectarian. If you're a Tamil, you're in trouble."
The next morning we went into the town. Fires were still burning pretty fiercely. And the thing was entirely sectarian. I mean, if you were a Tamil, you were in trouble.
Since it was the biggest anti-Tamil pogrom that occurred to that date, it caused the mass exodus of thousands of Tamil people seeking refuge in foreign countries, contributing to the beginning of the large Tamil diaspora we have today. To this day, none of the perpetrators have been brought to justice. The International Commission of Jurists Review declared in December 1983, under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, acts of murder committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group, as such, are considered as acts of genocide. The evidence points clearly to the conclusion that the violence of the Sinhala rioters on the Tamils in June, July and August 1983 amounted to acts of genocide. The following list shows massacres that took place between 1984 to 1986. Over 200 Tamils aged between 14 and 40 were chosen and killed by the Sri Lankan military by entering the village via trucks and helicopters for 3 continuous days. 135 of these Tamil people were the workers of a prawn farm in Mahiladittivu that operated with aid from the USA. Additional 24 Tamils, including 7 12-year-olds who sought refuge in Kokkadichole rice mill, were 2 shot dead by the same military. This list shows massacres that took place between 1990 to 1995. More than 220 Tamil people, including 17 workers in a rice grinding mill, were killed and burnt the bodies using tyres during the second wave of massacre in Kokkadichole by the Sri Lankan army on 12th of June 1991. The military damaged 400 houses and burnt down the rice grinding mill, along with the 17 workers inside. On 9th of July 1995, about 2,500 Tamil people followed the military's orders, leaving their homes and took refuge in St. Peter's Church in Navali, Jaffna. Then Sri Lankan Air Force deliberately bombed this church, killing 155 Tamil civilians and injuring 250. A mass grave was found at the Chemmani military checkpoint, while as many as 600 Tamil civilians went missing after being arrested by the military. In 1998, the Sri Lankan Human Rights Commission began inquiring into these disappearances, but no one has been found accountable. The suspected army officers live freely and have since been promoted. This list shows massacres that took place between 1996 to 2000. This list shows massacres that took place between 2005 to 2007. This shows the continuing genocide with the impunity in the northeast of Sri Lanka, the traditional homeland of Tamils. From 2008, the Sri Lankan army began their northern offensive, which ultimately ended with the most horrific period known as the Mullivakal massacre in 2009. Here is a list of various attacks by the Sri Lankan armed forces on the Tamil people from 2008 to 2009.
Early last year, MTV's main transmission station was attacked and gutted by an armed mob. Here, graphic evidence of an uncomfortable truth. Over the past decade, Sri Lanka has become one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a journalist.
In January 2009, the Sri Lankan government, having declared the first phase of no-fire zone, requesting the Tamil civilians to take refuge in that designated area. That area was subsequently bombed, killing scores of people in there. Again, in April 2009, a new no-fire zone was declared, advising the Tamil civilians to protect themselves, and that area too was bombed, killing thousands of innocent Tamil men, women and children, and the elderly people.
The aid agencies say a hospital packed with wounded's been repeatedly shelled, killing some patients and injuring many more. The Defence Secretary's told us right now everything's a legitimate target if it's not within.
Rajapaksa family have been at the forefront of recent years of suppression of the Tamil people. And now I think even Sinhalese people are realising that this family is not ruling in the interest of the people of Sri Lanka, but the interest of them and their clique. And I hope we see with the protest, there'll be many young people, many students who are protesting against this rule, where not just the global effects of inflation, but also the total mismanagement of the budget. Trees said huge amounts of money spent on military to suppress the Tamil people in the northeast, where most of the army is today. But also, frankly, siphoning off money for their corrupt family and their corrupt regime. And they made a complete hash of economic management of Sri Lanka, and it's now affecting absolutely everybody. And that sad tale of corruption and oppression is now, I think, something potentially a turning point. And how it is played, it will be by the Tamil cause will obviously be down to many Tamil populations there, TNA and other Tamil political parties trying to work out how best to promote the cause of human rights and justice for Tamil people and political reform above all. And I think it's really important that parliamentarians from around the world, not least the UK, think very carefully with the British Tamil cause about what the role is that we have to play, what the UK government can play in trying to use this moment of political and economic stability in Sri Lanka as a moment of change, a profound change to the benefit of the Tamil people. I don't have any answers, but I hope we can have that debate. I will focus on one particular thing, and that is actually, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to say the Chinese government. The Chinese government will be behind a vast increase in military spending in the noughties that led to 2009, particularly the purchase of those aircraft that we about. They've been responsible for the building of that naval harbour in the south of the island. They've been responsible for the indebtedness of Sri Lanka, much of their money having been siphoned off by the Rajapaksa family. We have to make sure that in the debate, not just in the Tamil community there, but in the Sinhalese community, the Muslim community, and the international community, that's the Chinese government is held responsible. And here's the strategy from my perspective. If we are going to use it, states, the UK, if Europe, Western democracies are going to use this moment of potential change in Sri Lankan politics, we can't allow the public opinion to be pushed towards Beijing. That would be a disaster for people from all communities. And so I feel this quite strongly. We've got to make sure that Chinese influence, that malign influence, is removed along with Gupta and the whole Rajapaksa family. And that could enable other players, not least this country, to use our political and economic influence to put serious pressure for reform. reform for the whole of the island, for all communities, but above all for political reform the Tamil people have worked for generations, to end the cycle of violence, to end the militarization. And so I think there is that opportunity. We've got to be skillful, we've got to pressure our own government, just as Theresa said, to use those Kaczynski sanctions against support the protesters across the island. But to map out a way out of this crisis. So whether it's the horrors we've seen in the film, the massive political instability on the island of Sri Lanka, we need a group of people who care about this issue, care about the rights of the Tamil people, got to think carefully and urgently about how we see situations. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to engaging. Obviously, the events around the 18th of May, which will always have following course, but as we chart the weeks and months ahead, to make sure we do our best in this country for that cause of justice. Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite Mr. Steve Baker is Member of Parliament for Wickham and has served in his since 2010. He has been on multiple treasury. He has been on multiple treasury and transport committees and was a minister at the Department of Existing and European from 2017 to 2018. Mr. Baker has been incredibly supportive of the British Tamil Forum and the wider Tamil diaspora. He is currently a member of the all-party parliamentary group for Tamil, and we hope that he will continue his support in our endeavours for justice, and we ask him to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You can tell I wasn't expecting to speak, but I put a tie on, so thanks very much indeed. I'm slightly trying to recover what we've already seen on this film. It's really shocking, and I think it reminds us that we take for granted toleration and equality in this country to an extent that, really we ought not. We should be a beacon, say that actually we can live in peace with one another, though we might disagree about religions or ethnicities or whatever the difference might be. So I am slightly still shocked. It's not often you have to sit down and really confront what continuing cycles of violence means. So that's the first thing, is I think it's a real wake-up call. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the I think it's very important to see the rest of it. The second thing is to say thank you to all of you for being here and the manner in which you campaign, because I dare say that many of you have lost loved ones in Sri Lanka, and I just want to acknowledge that that loss will be extremely present in your lives. So I think, again, the film reminds us of that. So thank you very much indeed for the way that you campaign in the context of your loss, your suffering, the injustice which families have been suffering. And the third point really is to say thank you for your continued support of our work here. We've all got important Tamil communities and indeed Sinhalese communities in our constituencies. And it's really important that you continue to engage with us locally. And I really appreciate the support of Tamil people. Extremely well in Temple in particular recently, and people have always been absolutely lovely. So please, of course, rest assured of my support. We must have justice in Sri Lanka. We must have an enduring peace as well. So congratulations to everybody involved in producing this documentary. As I say, I'm shocked already by what we see, and really important to see the rest. So thank you all very much indeed.
We would like to actually continue with the video. We are hoping that there won't further technical issues. So thank you.
continuing cycles of violence and genocide in Sri Lanka. The myriad of violence encountered by Tamil people cannot be covered within the time parameter provided, and we will try to present them as much as possible. Historical background in the preceding cycles of violence in Sri Lanka show that the Sinhala Buddhist ideology has been a major factor of the root cause for the deterioration of the peace and harmony in the country. This predicament has left every Tamil's life in Sri Lanka in a perilous situation. Unless the international community intervene and take tangible action to find a solution for peaceful coexistence, Ireland and the sensitive region around Sri Lanka will continue to be a theatre of conflict. With this brief introduction, let us see what the Tamils' plight has been during the past 7 decades. In an effort to verify the root causes of the current situation, it is prudent to analyse the historical development of Sinhala Buddhist chauvinism prior to gaining independence from the British Empire. Inspired by preachers such as Anagarika Dharmapala, one of the most influential Sinhala Buddhist revivalists at the turn of the 19th century, the first phase of the Sinhala Buddhist revivalist movement with the anti-Christian sentiments originated the Panadura debate in 1862. Sporadic attacks on Christian churches, dignitaries and Christian civilians were reported when another Panadura debate took place in 1873, and it repeated in Kotahena, Colombo, in 1883, followed by a burning down a Catholic church in Anuradhapura in 1903. The riot in 1915 by the Sinhala Buddhist chauvinists was directed on Muslim traders and shops against the control of over much of the business world by the Muslim community. Since Britain gave independence in 1948, the Tamils have been predominantly targeted with an agenda of eradicating Tamils and making Sri Lanka as a mono-ethnic, mono-religious and monolinguistic country. More than 150 recorded massacres have been committed periodically by the Sri Lankan state, Sri Lankan armed forces, paramilitary and Sinhalese mobs, causing more than 150,000 Tamil people losing their lives to date. Local Sinhalese colonists and employees of the Gal Oya Development Board seized government vehicles and weapons and killed over 150 Tamil people. Based on recovered body count, the estimate up to 1,500 Tamil people were killed by the Sinhala mob, starting on the 22nd of May and continued till the 29th of May, despite an emergency was passed on the 27th of May in 1958. 9 Tamil people were killed and further 50 Tamil civilians sustained severe injuries when the Sri Lankan police force went berserk and opened fire on the Tamil civilians and academics who were attending the 4th World Tamil Conference organised by International Association for Tamil Research in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. The violence broke out and spread across the island, where Sinhala mobs murdered hundreds of Tamil civilians by burning them alive, raping, killing and looting their homes and businesses when the Tamil United Liberation Front had a landslide victory and won 18 seats at the 1977 general elections, with a manifesto of working towards reinstating an independent, secular state of Tamil Eelam, citing the sufferance of 3 decades of oppression perpetrated by the Sri Lankan state. The Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, PTA, was introduced in 1979 with the primary motive of suppressing the voice of the Tamils in the country and to have power to arrest arbitrarily, torture, assault sexually, imprison and execute, including disposing bodies without inquiry. Since introduction, thousands of Tamil men and women have been arrested, tortured and sexually abused and made to disappear, and these are continuing even today. The Tamil people's irreplaceable assets were deliberately destroyed when the Jaffna Public Library, the biggest library in South Asia, was burnt down by the arson attack by the Sinhala mob, brought by a ruling UMP party, headed by Cabinet Minister Gamini Dissanayaka from the south of the island. Over 97,000 important ancient manuscripts, including memoirs and works of Tamil writers who made a significant contribution toward the sustenance of Tamil culture, medicine and politics, were burnt to ash. For the Tamils, the devastated library became a symbol of cultural genocide. Over 3,000 Tamils were killed, burnt alive, scores of Tamil women were raped, over 150,000 Tamils became displaced, and over 8,000 Tamils' own businesses and homes were looted and burnt down by the Sinhalese mob during the state-aided Black July pogrom occurred between the 24th and 30th of July, 1983. The Tamils were pulled out of the passing vehicles onto the street, were hacked to death, were doused with petrol and burnt alive. A Western tourist witnessed, quoted, "The thing was entirely sectarian. If you're a Tamil, you're in trouble."
The next morning we went into the town. Fires were still burning pretty fiercely. And the thing was entirely sectarian. I mean, if you were a Tamil, you were in trouble.
Since it was the biggest anti-Tamil pogrom that occurred to that date, it caused the mass exodus of thousands of Tamil people seeking refuge in foreign countries, contributing to the beginning of the large Tamil diaspora we have today. To this day, none of the perpetrators have been brought to justice. The International Commission of Jurists Review declared in December 1983, under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, acts of murder committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group, as such, are considered as acts of genocide. The evidence points clearly to the conclusion that the violence of the Sinhala rioters on the Tamils in June, July and August 1983 amounted to acts of genocide. The following list shows massacres that took place between 1984 to 1986. Over 200 Tamils aged between 14 and 40 were chosen and killed by the Sri Lankan military by entering the village via trucks and helicopters for 3 continuous days. 135 of these Tamil people were the workers of a prawn farm in Mahiladittivu that operated with aid from the USA. Additional 24 Tamils, including 7 12-year-olds who sought refuge in Kokkadichole rice mill, were 2 shot dead by the same military. This list shows massacres that took place between 1990 to 1995. More than 220 Tamil people, including 17 workers in a rice grinding mill, were killed and burnt the bodies using tyres during the second wave of massacre in Kokkadichole by the Sri Lankan army on 12th of June 1991. The military damaged 400 houses and burnt down the rice grinding mill along with the 17 workers inside. On 9th of July 1995, about 2,500 Tamil people followed the military's orders, leaving their homes and took refuge in St. Peter's Church in Navali, Jaffna. Then Sri Lankan Air Force deliberately bombed this church, killing 155 Tamil civilians and injuring 250. A mass grave was found at the Chemmani military checkpoint, while as many as 600 Tamil civilians went missing after being arrested by the military. In 1998, the Sri Lankan Human Rights Commission began inquiring into these disappearances, but no one has been found accountable. The suspected army officers live freely and have since been promoted. This list shows massacres that took place between 1996 to 2000. This list shows massacres that took place between 2005 to 2007. This shows the continuing genocide with the impunity in the northeast of Sri Lanka, the traditional homeland of Tamils. From 2008, the Sri Lankan army began their northern offensive, which ultimately ended with the most horrific period known as the Mullivakal massacre in 2009. Here is a list of various attacks by the Sri Lankan armed forces on the Tamil people from 2008 to 2009.
Early last year, MTV's main transmission station was attacked and gutted by an armed mob. Here, graphic evidence of an uncomfortable truth. Over the past decade, Sri Lanka has become one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a journalist.
In January 2009, the Sri Lankan government, having declared the first phase of no-fire zone, requesting the Tamil civilians to take refuge in that designated area. That area was subsequently bombed, killing scores of people in there. Again, in April 2009, a new no-fire zone was declared, advising the Tamil civilians to protect themselves, and that area too was bombed, killing thousands of innocent Tamil men, women and children, and the elderly people.
The aid agencies say a hospital packed with wounded's been repeatedly shelled, killing some patients and injuring many more. The Defence Secretary's told us right now everything's a legitimate target if it's not within the safe zone the government's created. And footage like this has alarmed the government. Posted on the rebel website, it appears to show civilians coming under attack.
The no-fire zone was in cramped and squalid conditions that was under constant attack by indiscriminate shelling and bombing by the Sri Lankan Air Force, and the people gathered there believed that the international community would save them.
Wasn't there, and I remember the Defense Secretary saying, "Oh, trials, you know, they go on so long, and people get off," and then he said, "I killed them. You know, that's not justice."
In this sequence, recorded on a mobile phone by Sri Lankan government forces, naked Tiger prisoners are executed with their hands bound behind their backs.
It's a brutal watch, the summary execution of Tamil prisoners by Sri Lankan government soldiers. Footage first broadcast on this programme and authenticated by the United Nations.
Tamil families, young and old, were constantly on the move and spent a lot of time in bunkers to protect themselves from bombs, including banned cluster and phosphorus bombs being dropped by the Sri Lankan Air Force on the densely Tamil civilian populated no-fire zone. Hospitals were wantonly targeted.
Well, what about the 30 instances of attacks on hospitals or makeshift hospitals between December 2008 and May 2009?
First, the government should stop the indiscriminate shelling that has taken hundreds of innocent lives, including several hospitals. The government should live up to its commitment to not use heavy weapons in the conflict zone.
The Sri Lankan state used food and medicine as weapons of war. These were intentionally prevented by the state from reaching the no-fire zone. Many Tamil people were starved to death, while seriously injured were left without treatment in the no-fire zone. The dead bodies were buried beneath the sand. The Sri Lankan army moved around 280,000 internally displaced Tamil people from the no-fire zone into concentration camps. It was overcrowded, unsanitary and ridden with disease. Tamil families were split up, with many missing after being taken for inquiries. Rape and torture were the norm to the soldiers, and Joseph Camp was the most notorious one. Even after the brutal ending of the armed struggle in 2009, the cycle of violence continues today with increased militarization in the Tamil homeland of the north and east of Sri Lanka. No accountability. Perpetrators of heinous crimes live with complete impunity and no justice to the Tamils.
Whether it is United Nations or whether it is any other country, I am not allowing any investigation in this country. There is no reason where nothing wrong happened in this country. There will be no investigations in this country. Take it from me, I am the Secretary of Defense, and I will oppose anybody who wants to have this thing. I will not have anything. This is my final word.
Many Tamil civilians, journalists, have been abducted and killed by the state and paramilitary groups. One such incident was the disappearance of a journalist and Sinhalese cartoonist, Praghit Egnalikoda, whose whereabouts is unknown after 10th of January 2010. In 2014, violence against Muslims increased, burning, looting and destroying their homes and shops by Sinhala Buddhist nationalists, reminiscent
the countries they now call home. And I'm very, very proud that we've got quite a large Tamil population in Richmond Park, and that they are really, really important members of our community as well. We have a number of Tamils serving on as councillors in my constituency, and I'm very much looking forward to hopefully next week 1 or 2 more, including in the ward that I actually live in. I'm hoping very much that we will have a Tamil councillor representing us, because they are such important members of the local community, not just the Tamil community, but they have contributed so much to Kingston and to Richmond and I'm sure to all the other communities that they found themselves at home. And we very much welcome them. I don't have a huge amount to add to what Sarah Davey was saying earlier on, other than that, you know, the Tamils fight for justice is our fight. We stand with them. We will do all we can as parliamentarians to advance their cause. And it's been, I think, in the same way as it was a little, not wanting to call it a pleasure to watch the video, but very much a sobering experience, but one I'm very glad to have experienced this evening. So thank you so much for organising this event and to putting on this video for us. And I will continue to work hard to represent the Tamil community and justice. Thank you so much.
Next up, I would like to invite the member of the Parliament for Ilford and the Shadow Secretary for Health and Social Care since 2021. He has served in the House of Commons since 2015 and has been an incredible proponent for the interests of Tamils across the UK. Representing a very large population of Tamils, he has been the Vice Chair of the all-party parliamentary group for Tamils since he was elected, and has regularly joined us on mission to Geneva. He is a very focused and dedicated individual to the Tamil community, having made many appearances in support of Tamil rights in Sri Lanka. We would like to bring on the stage a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see so many of you here in person. We've really missed you in Parliament during the lockdown measures and missed welcoming you into Parliament. And it's great that we've kept some of the best of what we learned with the pandemic, with lots of people participating online, and you're very welcome virtually too. Beyond like others, the emotional reaction to that very powerful film, I'm struck by 2 things really. One is that so much of this has been going on throughout my entire life, the best part of 40 years, and with the ongoing human rights abuses that we heard described just at the end of the film by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, there's an urgency about this. And that brings me on to my second reflection, which is I've been a member of Parliament here since 2015, and it really does feel like we've lost some momentum actually in this place and the focus on human rights in Sri Lanka. You know, when David Miliband was the president, he described what happened in Sri Lanka as a war without witness, and there was a humility and a recognition reflected in the film by President Obama that the international community had failed the people of Sri Lanka and the Tamil community in particular by failing to act. And it doesn't feel like we've really learned those lessons. From one David to another, whatever disagreements I had with David Cameron, I really felt like when he was the Prime Minister, he understood the issues. He went to Sri Lanka, he went to the north of the country, and many of us, particularly on the opposition benches, have real misgivings about that judgment. Many in the community had misgivings about that visit to Sri Lanka. But I would say on reflection, he really used that moment and leverage to really advance the cause, and we saw real progress being made at the UN Human Rights Council, and it feels like we've lost some of that momentum. Now that's not simply a criticism of our government, and as we heard reflected earlier, with so much going on in the world at the moment internationally, let alone the big issues we're grappling with domestically, it's understandable that the issues, that we're competing with other issues globally, not least in terms of what's going on in our own continent in Ukraine. It's also a reflection of the fact that it felt like for a while we had willing partners in the Sri Lankan government, and even if they didn't always do what they said they would, there was a willingness of the UN resolution sponsoring and supporting the resolutions that were led on by our own government here in the UK. And not only do we not have a willing partner in the government Sri Lanka any longer, we have the Rajapaksas back in power and living up to our worst fears and expectations when they return to power. So I think this film is very powerful and it's very timely. It's a reminder to all of us as parliamentarians of our responsibility to help raise this issue on the agenda here in Parliament and to continue what we've done at the UN. I think one of the great strengths of the all-party parliamentary group is it's been genuinely all-party, and looking out this evening, we've got Conservative colleagues, including ministers, former ministers and cabinet ministers. We've got Liberal Democrats here as well. We've been a really good, strong cross-party team, and I think we've got to use that cross-party strength to try and raise the profile of Sri Lanka and human rights in Sri Lanka on the parliamentary agenda. We've got to make sure that the international community doesn't lose focus, and our government and our allies in Geneva have got lots of work to do to keep the momentum up with resolutions. But there also we have to start sending a message to tyrants and aspiring dictators around the world that actions have consequences. And I think we're seeing in our own continent at the moment a reminder of what happens when the democracies of the world look the other way in the face of tyranny and aggression. And I fear we're in danger of making the same mistakes again in Sri Lanka if we don't act together, because one of the challenging things about this century is that it's not inevitable that democracy triumphs in our world, that liberty and freedom and human rights win the day. And it's certainly an inevitability that we will fail unless we stand up for democracy and freedom and human rights all over the world. And our country has, under successive governments of different political stripes, had a proud tradition actually of standing up for human rights in the world. And we've got to live up to the best of our traditions to stand against the worst of human nature and some of the instincts that we see in governments around the world. And so to finish on an optimistic note, one of the things that has given me hope, as Sir Ed David was reflecting on earlier, there are people in Sri Lanka that are standing up for freedom and democracy and human rights. And there are people in Sri Lanka from all communities that are standing up against the Rajapaksas. So there is some hope, because this can't just be about the international community. Change has to come from within, change has to come from below. And so it's important that we use all of our offices here in Parliament and the platform that we have as parliamentarians. It's also really important that you use the networks that you have within the communities locally to lobby members of Parliament, but also to make sure that what we're saying here is heard in Sri Lanka, and that where you've got family ties and community ties back home in Sri Lanka, that they're hearing what we have to say to them, that they know that they're not on their own, and that the world hasn't forgotten the failures during the Sri Lankan Civil War, and we're determined to put things right. So a challenging moment, I think, for Sri Lanka, a very challenging watch and an important provocation, really important moment. So thank you very much for having me along this evening, not least because one of the downsides of my responsibilities in the Shadow Cabinet is I don't get to say what I like on a wide range of issues on the floor of the House of Commons anymore. So it's nice to have a platform in committee rooms to be able to talk about issues beyond my brief on health and social care. And as lots of you know, before I was elected as the Member of Parliament for Ilford North, thanks to our local Tamil community, I got a good education on the history of the conflict and actually the history of our failure as a country And I was determined when I was sent to this place to be a voice for human rights in Sri Lanka and to stand up for all of the peoples of Sri Lanka to deliver that truth, that justice, that accountability, and hopefully reconciliation that I think we all want to see for all of the peoples of Sri Lanka. So thank you very much for having me along. I'll do my best to amplify this film and to get the message across and work with colleagues cross-party to try and raise the profile of issues on human rights in Sri Lanka here in the House of Commons and in Geneva, wherever I can. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Paul Scully is a member of Parliament, having represented his constituency since 2015. He was the chair of the all-party parliamentary group Tamil from 2016 to 2020. He is the parliamentary undersecretary of the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Energy and the Minister of State for London. Mr. Scully has tirelessly engaged and lobbied for the Tamil people through foreign missions to Geneva. He has been to the UNHRC second many times to lobby for truth, accountability and justice for Tamil through an independent international investment. I give you Mr. Paul Scully.
It's lovely to see everybody here. Actually, I'm sitting in front of now to see you all. It's just great to actually all be back together again. As we're set to be able to welcome you to Parliament. We've had so many occasions, sometimes the hard watches, the hard discussions, sometimes celebrating, pretending and Taipong, those kind of things. So we've really shared lots of ups and downs together over the years, but it's nice that we can do that in person, that we can have these discussions, extend the hand of friendship and of solidarity. As everybody has said, that was a really difficult watch. It was a really difficult watch to actually remind ourselves not only the horrors of what happened and is happening, not only the fact that it's over such a long, extended time. That's what's driven all of the parliamentarians to come and support the communities that we represent, big diaspora communities that we represent. But the depressing thing for me, having become a minister a couple of years, 2.5 years ago, which meant I had to step away from being a member, my chair of the APPG, and I'm glad that Elliot Colvin took over and was doing a great job with all of my colleagues here. I've basically been hunkered down, as we all have, COVID, but also in ministerial duties. And so to come back to this, my first event with the ATPG since that period, to find that really, not only has nothing changed, it's actually got worse. That's incredibly depressing. But what we've seen, I think it's degrees of outline right at the beginning, protests that we're seeing in Sri Lanka, we are seeing a rise from the inside, a rise from the island itself, both from Sinhala and Tamil, to say enough is enough. We have seen the horrendous, the worst of the virus that was predicted by so many, and it is now time for people within Sri Lanka to act, but clearly for the Tamil diaspora around the world to make sure that they can use their offices, they can use their good offices and their means as well, to make sure that the international community absolutely steps up to make Sri Lanka have that positive change. And because we've seen that, I think it was Ed that was saying earlier, it's too easy to divert your attention from one conflict to another. I remember, I'm half Burmese, so I was the first MP into the refugee camps in Bangladesh when the Rohingya were fleeing for their lives. And I remember saying at the time, if there will be enough conflicts that will just take the Rohingya Muslims off the front pages of the newspapers. And indeed, and Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, and now, of course, Ukraine. We thought that the Second World War was going to be the fall to end all, but that doesn't take into account human nature. That doesn't take into account the horrendous ways that people can dehumanize other people. And I think that's one of the key things about it. It's not just about murder. It's not just about injuries, pushing people out there about their homeland. Where genocide is at its most cynical is when it just one group of humans, one that just do not treat the other as humans. They totally dehumanize them. They see them as, I don't know what they see. I can't even really imagine. But that is the mindset that you've been facing over all of these decades. That's the mindset that we're going to work out how to change. And it will only be by the international community coming together and keep on pushing through the United Nations when we've been to Geneva to ensure that the United Nations does act. But the problem is, how much can the United Nations really do? Because there is only, it fast becomes a bit of a talking shop. It fast becomes us repeating our conversations, our protestations when we've been to Geneva. Now, I can't stand here and speak on behalf of the government. I'm not a foreign office minister, so it'd be wrong for me to reflect on this this ongoing travesty as a government minister. But I will welcome and I will support all the work that the all-party parliamentary group is doing to speak to our Foreign Secretary, to speak to Lord Ahmed as well as the minister for that area, to make sure that they're doing everything to mobilise the international community to get beyond speaking and get into real action. I would just say what I saw in the film there when it talks about the economy and people think that we don't look at government with the prism of human rights only gain profit. That can be true, but there's so much more that economic benefits bring to Sri Lanka than just profit, than just in investment in both sides. It's investments in the community. What we want to do by supporting the Tamil people in Sri Lanka. We don't want to impoverish. We clearly want to make sure that when, to be positive, when they get truth and reconciliation and they get that through justice, they have a future. They have a prosperous future. They have a future that money can be invested in their country, and not just public money, but private money as well. Companies coming in, giving them opportunities through jobs and through wealth creation, through the ability to set up their own businesses to thrive. That's the future beyond reconciliation. But boy, do we have a long way to go. But I'm there every step of the way.
Thank you. Next, I would like to ask a representative from the Human Rights Watch to say a few words.
Hello there. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Very moving and disturbing film. I've been asked to speak about the current crisis in Sri Lanka. And since I think it's very knowledgeable, I'll keep it as brief as possible. Obviously, it's both the economic and the political crisis. In both respects, it's been quite a long time coming, even though it's now reached rather quickly, especially on the political side, a sort of crisis period. Sri Lanka has borne this unsustainable public debt for a long time. And someone referred earlier to corruption, which has contributed to this, including under the previous Rajapaksa administration. The intervening Yalabalana administration made some progress in investigating corruption and trying to trace national assets which had been suppressed abroad, but those investigations were ended up when required in 2019. So of course there were then a couple of disasters, more than a couple of disasters, was the decision they were expecting, including unaffordable tax cuts, the ban on fertilizer and so on. And this has led to an acute crisis which almost the entire population is suffering from shortages of medicine, which are now reaching a life-threatening extent, food price inflation running over 20%, there's no paper to write exams on, that can be imported. You're familiar with all of this. And this has brought out these unprecedented protests, which in many ways, many of the people that we speak to in the country find a great deal of optimism in these protests, despite the hardship which is occasioned them. They're an optimistic occasion because all manner of classes and communities, including the constituencies which led to the current administration, have joined these demands of disputes, calling for the Rajapaksa family to leave office, to leave the country, something which couldn't have been expected, I think, even 6 months ago. Nevertheless, the political situation and the economic situation and the convergence of the two is obviously quite intractable. It's unclear what's going to happen one day to the next in terms of the future of the government, or how some kind of political settlement, even an interim one, could be reached, which will allow the economic situation to begin to be addressed. So it's a time of great uncertainty. I think the idea that it's an opportunity has been mentioned. There are several ways, I guess, in which Britain can contribute to trying to seize that opportunity. And of course, we can't know how it's going to play out. Sri Lanka is in many ways a kind of frontline state in its tussle between autocracy and democracy, which frames so many of the situations we find around the globe. I think the Rajapaksa government clearly love to shelter under Beijing's wing diplomatically and economically. They've attempted to turn to Beijing for economic support. They've reached the end of the road, evidently, that. The way to, prevail in that tussle, I think, is to support a pluralistic, liberal, stable, inclusive democracy. I think clearly that not happened until now, not been achieved until now. I think there are certain opportunities in the IMF's dimension to support those types of outcomes. We wrote to the IMF publicly, you can find that on our website, a couple of weeks ago, talking about how they define their mandate quite narrowly in terms of economic issues and issues that affect the economy. But they can support or impose conditions which call for respect for the rule of law, for accountability, for corruption, issues of the ability budget, especially secretive aspects of the budget, which are not subject to public audit, are things that they could raise the bar on, seek to address. The resolution, the current resolution of the Human Rights Council called 6/1, is due to expire in September. Britain, of course, is the penholder of the full group. It will need to be renewed or rolled over or strengthened. It's essential that a similar or even better resolution is adopted. And I think that the core group and its allies of the council need to begin to think about where those votes are going to come from now and what that resolution looks like. And that resolution has perhaps helped to constrain the administration cracking down more than they have on these protests. It's been widely noted that to burnish their human rights image such as this over the past year. The pressure created by that resolution was important and it will remain important. For all of those reasons of historic accountability, war crimes, and so on, as well as the current crisis. And magnitude sanctions, I guess, is the third big one, which can do. That's normally announced towards the end of the year. So to do that this year would not be to necessarily weigh in the midst of current reval situation, some kind of settlement by then. And I think we can't imagine a settlement which it would be appropriate to impose magnitude sanctions on. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you all for your continued support. We would like to now open your questions and answers to be answered by Mr. Ravi. Do we have any questions for our panelists? If you would like to stand up and introduce yourself, and please, yes.
I'm Dr. Sundarelinga. Dr. Sundaram, I'm a GP, just retired, but I'm unfortunately the message that I want to pass on the people out there, but still I will tell what I wanted to tell them. But in Sri Lanka, most of you know, it's just a few lines. It is more than 70 years since we had the independence. It was given to us. At that time, it was, our country was known as Ceylon. Now, there have been negotiations. Several people will know unfortunately that I wrote this on the past that all the members of parliament. But I passed on. The negotiation after negotiation took place to settle the issue between the Sinhalese and the Sri Lankan Tamil people, and agreements were made, but every time when the time came to implement the agreement, the Sinhalese government pulled back and withdrew the agreement. This was the tactic they used and are still trying to use in order to buy time to colonize the land belonging to our Tamil kingdom. Colonize the Tamil kingdom with Sinhalese people. And at the rate they are doing now, there will not be any land left for the Tamil people to claim their Tamil kingdom. Now, to go forward and settle Sri Lankan Tamil people's issue permanently, only Britain, together with UN, can do it. It is the duty of Britain to get back our Tamil kingdom to the Tamils. Britain has the right to do it because Britain took over our Tamil kingdom, but failed to give it back to the Tamils when independence was given to the Sinhalese people. I know it is difficult, but not impossible, and it will take time, but it can be done, and it has to be done to prevent genocide of the Tamil people and the human rights violation by the same. I beg of members of British Parliament who are present here, they are left now, on behalf of all the Sri Lankan Tamil people, to help us to bring this Tamil issue to the attention of their fellow MPs of both sides of the House of Parliament. Thank you.
Yeah. And the whole world is engaged in achieving agenda for 30 the north and the east, the Tamils and the Muslims. Post on anti-agenda matters reality. That is, they are unable to have political power, economic power, or social power, or even environmental power, and they are actually being oppressed psychologically. That was the plan laid down even before the war was over, to carry out psychological operations on the north and the east, on the Tamil people. Psychological operations mean you are annulled from doing anything. Every possible way of oppression is going on. That is, as soon as the war was over, on the 18th of May 2009, on the 19th, the whole of Trinity and the Mulati was out of access for anybody, including ICRs. And divisions of army were pushed in. Within 2 weeks, they established Trinity and Mulati were the security forces headquarters. Already we had Jaffna security forces headquarters established in 1980s, and the VAMI, that is combination of Ammonia and Manna districts combined into one security force headquarters. So these two, Bulatim and Quinochi, the area that was under the command of the LTT, got to security forces headquarters within 2 weeks. So that was the rush of militarization for psychological operations on the people. So how are we going to achieve 2030, Agenda 2030, that is sustainable development goals.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Would you like to do?
Yes, please. I have a question. You can just ask.
I have a question. You know what? Maybe. One view, now going through this page, engaging. That's
May I know your name, please? Could you introduce your name? Thank you. Dr. Raj.
We have one more person.
This question is about the role of diaspora at this moment, and there are various views going on. One is that the people who are protesting, they are only asking for Rajapaksas to go. When the Rajapaksas go, another Rani will come, or anybody comes, our problem remains the same. No one is talking even a single word about Mullivai Thala, Tamil problem. So we shouldn't get carried away by, if we ask Rajapaksas to go, we are today, so that we are not moving forward politically. So I think VTF can mobilize the diaspora towards in the right direction. Thanks.
Let me finish it somewhere.
No, I said here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, this I would like to say this documentary film was initiated 5 years ago, and we completed the script about eight months ago. When we completed the entire production and was ready to be released in last year. So at the time, there was no such crisis in Ukraine and Russia. So how relevant is in the current international crisis? Has the international community succeeded in containing Sri Lanka or apply all the leverages and enforce the resources? Sri Lanka wouldn't have been come to this level, and the crisis in Ukraine would have been much different. Even a small country like Sri Lanka cannot be maintained by the international community. That is the pity. We continue to say never again. The international leaders continue to say never again. But it happens again and again. Because there is no impunity, there is no accountability. When it comes to the state terrorism, nobody bothers. So this is one aspect of raising the awareness of what's going on in Sri Lanka. The cycles of violence in Sri Lanka is much different to any other country. It has been going on for not only 70 years, it has been going on since the 1860s. So it's again, first it was again Christians, Muslims, then after 1948, ever since they gained independence, it's again Tamils mostly, and even after the end of the war, it is against all non-singular Buddhists. So this is not going to end. Without finding the root causes of the conflict, without finding why these repeated cycles of violence erupt, we don't find a stable, prosperous, peaceful Sri Lanka. That's why we, the British Armed Forum, along with our partners globally, we continue to advocate, continue to engage the stages, continue to engage the decision here, not just in the UK, UN, and many other countries. So we want all of your support. We want all of your engagement, all of your resources, not just finance, your intellectual and other resources are required in order to bring this to the next high level. As Human Rights Watch said, we are waiting for another resolution. It has to focus on some kind of international prosecution. That is the international platform we need to push for. For that, we need more and more country support. Particularly, we need at least 24 countries, member states, voting in support of the new resolution. That is one of the action we are trying to mobilize the international. Two, when it comes to UK, we need the support of MPs, First Party, to apply all the leverages, particularly the Magnitsky Act like Sanction Regime Act, Human Rights Sanction Regime Act passed in 2020 with the support of the Right Honorable Teresa Villiers, has to be applied. Hundreds of people were sanctioned. Not just one sanction has been enforced against the perpetrators of Sri Lankan genocide. Why? Are we different? When it comes, when the war started in the fire, within a week or so, they started rolling for sanctions, individual sanctions, trade sanctions. So this is where your support is very much required. Please engage with your MPs, parliamentarians, and yes, as she said, now is the time to look for a different solution to Sri Lanka. The first and foremost is because the north and east is much different to the rest of the south of the island. It went through 30 years of war and 13 years of post-war without any substantial rehabilitation, reconstruction, resettlement process. So we need an interim administration. It has to take care of the people who were victimized, to bring the north and east, the traditional homeland, to the empowering the rest of the island. So that requires an interim administration. That is a humanitarian issue. So we are looking for the international community, particularly UK, USA, India, to set up an interim administration. This has happened in the past. Within the constitutional arrangements, Mahawali Authority has been a successful project So that covered, that has been given enough resources and adequate powers to complete the 30 years long plan within 6 years. So if that is possible, when the people are suffering for a longer period in the Northeast, we need at least 2 to 3 years of interim administration to be settled in for the Northeast, looked after or coordinated by the elected representative. 1. 2, we need a long-term sustainable political solution. From the ground, all the Tamil national MPs from all 3 parties are requesting for a political solution based on the right to self-determination and the principles of federalism. So if they are asking for that, the international community has to listen to that and arbitrate this solution. As you said, every avenue has been closed down by the state, regardless of the government. So we need the international community to intervene and negotiate for a arbitrated political solution. As Dr. Rajan said, yeah, there's a different moment now, but what is missing? The Rajapaksas are hated. After he was brought to power with overwhelming majority, now within 2 years they are discontinued and everyone is looking for a regime change. Regime change is not going to solve the problem. We want the system change. We want the entire system, regardless of the state or other, particularly the political judiciary, bureaucracy, security forces, and the philosophy has to be changed. So that is where the Tamils have to focus on. So that is something we all can work together. We all can engage the international community. So this is where the Tamils present here can help, can come forward and work with us. We have a strategy. There are certain other things. I don't want to take much of your time. Okay, is there anything I missed?
Do you think they are actually the people who are interested? I'm seeing that they cannot come out of it. Basically, what they're saying, that's basically what has been identified by brain. That is not possible. And basically, that's it. So, sympathy is very hard. So that understanding that be blind justice.
I say, Sri Lankan, have you ever had any sort of invitation from any of the similar political, trade union, or civil societies, religious societies, inviting or asking the British Tamil Forum to join them in this current crisis? Have there anybody? Officially or not?
Probably from the onset, British Tamil Forum standpoint is let the Tamil representatives elected by the people on the ground can work with the Sri Lankan people, the southern Sri Lanka. They can negotiate, and we as the Tamil diaspora can promote using our access, influence, and resources here to find a negotiated political settlement. And in order to do that, we should not give up or compromise on the international justice mechanism. So we will be focusing on international justice mechanism, though it is a long shot. We will also work with the elected representatives Today also we received a call from one of the Sinhalese diaspora. So unless or otherwise, the Sinhalese diaspora, Sri Lankan diaspora, recognizes what went wrong, what are the root causes of the conflict. There's no point we talk to them. It is the onus on the civil society in Sri Lanka to deal with the elected representatives and councils.
What I asked was, not to criticize, so I'm not trying to jeopardize the relationship with the Tamil parliamentarians. What we asked was whether we are because you as a media when anyone from a Sinhalese community, anyone has approached you to support them. That's a simple question to ask. Because in none of the people in the Sinhalese government or trade unions or whoever, none of them they are talking to get Rajapaksa authority. But they are not talking about what is going to happen the next step. Are they going to have an opinion or are they going to go for a different parliamentary system or they are going to take the position? None of them are talking about that. So they are not bothered about it. And we are not really bothered about it. So it's a majority community.
There are some different tones coming from the ground, particularly at the site of the protest, but that is not enough. It is just a few, particularly from the youth. Yeah. So let's wait and see. This is this could be a possibility of bringing the Tamil life, what they have endured in the past 30-40 years, for us to understand. That has to happen there. But we were not being reached out by the Thank you.
Yes, my opinion.
Sorry, I think.
But we will be having a little network event after this event. Thank you.
Is it possible to register your name and phone number there if you missed out?
Sorry.
It is now that time of the evening where we have to wrap up. We would like to thank you all for joining us today, and a huge thank you to the Right Honourable Frida Villiers again for helping us host this wonderful and impressive event. This film will be shared across the world from the 13th of May, and we would appreciate if you could share this among all those you know. It is an incredibly important message. In addition, the film will be made available on YouTube straight after the event and for the general public to view. Finally, we would like to give a huge thank you to the British Tamil Forum research team for gathering all the material to make this documentary. A special thanks to Mr. Murray Kumar, General Secretary of State of British Tamil Forum, Mr. Tirunavu Harasu, Abi, Samiran, Mariarijin, and Siva Bhaskar for their contribution. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.